Hi everyone, I'm Swati Thiyagarajan. Welcome to the Sikh Sanctuary Talks brought to you by Sanctuary Nature Foundation and Book My Show on Facebook. Thank you for tuning in. These talks have been curated to commemorate the 50th anniversary of World Earth Day. World Earth Day was established in 1970 after a horrific oil spill off the coast of Santa Barbara, California in 1969, which ruined a lot of marine life and the coast. 20 million people across the United States became part of World Earth Day, and they raised awareness around pollution and environmental issues. And 5 decades down the line, here we are doing the same across the world. However, right now, in the backdrop of this horrific pandemic that has engulfed the world and brought us all to a grinding halt, this significance of World Earth Day has taken on a whole new level of significance. This is our decade, 2020 to 2030. It's a now or never decade. We have a chance now to do something about it. We came into 2020 with crazy out-of-control fires in Australia, the Antarctic recording some of the highest temperatures, 18 degrees Celsius, with huge ice melts and red algae blooming. We had 3 years of the warmest ocean temperatures ever recorded, the hottest year to date on Earth, 2019, and now this pandemic. This pandemic is a zoonotic and a direct result of tragic long-term consequences of the wildlife trade. The illegal wildlife trade and the consumption of wildlife in unhygienic conditions in wet markets. The illegal wildlife trade has been happening for decades. It's been part of the drug trade, the gun trade, human trafficking, and yet not enough attention has been paid to stopping it. So many species have been brought to the brink because of this trade. And also, apart from the illegal wildlife trade being part of the wet markets, a lot of our zoonotics like swine flu, bird flu, and all of those diseases have also come because of the way we treat animals in captive conditions, how we crowd them together, keep them in cramped conditions, increase their stress levels, reduce their immunity, and give all these pathogens a space to rise. Now, while the illegal wildlife trade is decimating species specifically, our legal and illegal development activity has decimated habitats across the world. With this two-pronged attack on the environment, along with growing populations crowding together and coming closer and closer, we've created this perfect storm for the spread of zoonotic diseases. And if anyone had been living in denial about this, this is a wake-up call. We have this decade, 2020 to 2030. What do I mean by that? If we have any regard for our children and our future generations, we'll be making the right choices now. We cannot continue to live like we do, like we are a predator species that breeds like prey but lives like a parasite off this living planet. In India, the Dhauladars are visible from Jalandhar. People living in Jalandhar for 15 years did not even know that was possible. India usually numbers 12 to 15 of the most polluted cities in the world. Our numbers should be climbing. But right now we have, blue skies and no air pollution. The Yamuna is flowing free and blue without that toxic, almost radioactive sludge and foam that used to form on the top of the river. The Ganga in certain places of Rishikesh and Haridwar has been certified good for drinking, drinkable water. What this has proved beyond a shadow of a doubt is that two things have been the biggest problems: industrial activity and our own human carbon footprints. Now that we're in a lockdown, obviously our footprints have shrunk a lot and industrial activity has stopped, and so we can see a notable difference to the environment around us. If after this irrefutable evidence, if there are still people out there who doubt that our climate change crisis that we're facing was not triggered by human activity and exacerbated by human activity, then there's no hope for people like that. And if those are the people who are in charge of our policies and in charge of our government, well, then there's no hope for any of us unless we speak out, we raise awareness, we fight and make the right choices. This enforced break has shown that the planet will start a healing process if given a chance. We've already heated this planet up by over a degree, almost 1.5 degrees Celsius above normal. This has already put in place climate catastrophes. These are catastrophes that are locked in. No matter what we do now, if we stop all activity tomorrow, some of the repercussions of this temperature increase will play out, like hurricanes, bigger storms, droughts, floods. These are continuing to happen. If we suddenly, from tomorrow, stopped all activity in terms of we became a zero net emission of carbon economy, and if we managed to turn completely to renewables, some of those things would still play out. It's kind of like if I pick up a gun and I fire it, Even if I put the gun down and never touch the gun again, that bullet is going to keep firing and causing damage till it finally hits inertia and stops. And here we are firing guns morning, noon, and night. And if all of us put the guns down and never touch a gun again, the bullets that we've already fired are causing the damage that they're causing. So what we have in this decade is to make the decisions that will not stop the immediate effects of what we've already put in motion, but change the level of catastrophe of what our children will have to face in their future and give them a fighting chance. Once we're let out of lockdown and quarantines, if we fly out of the gate like racehorses, trying to make up for lost time, well, then we're just going to reverse any gains that we've made. Many people, many of our most vulnerable people, don't have the choices we have. They've lost wages, they've lost livelihoods, they've lost homes, their children are starving. They don't have the luxury of making choices. They cannot stop and think about the environment in the way that we can. Those of us who can and have the luxury, we can think about the consequences. And if those of us who can think about those consequences don't make the right choices, what hope do we have left? Because we're also living in a time of the greatest moral crisis on this planet. The vulnerable people I'm talking about, they've caused the least amount of damage to cause the problems that we have today. It's you and me. It's us with our lifestyle choices. We want cars, we want roads, we want iron and steel, we want energy, we want to fly here, we want to fly there. It's all of that that's caused the damage that we're facing today. So that's another thing to teach your children. The moral price, a moral cost to the privileged lives that we live. How did we get on this trajectory? How did we, Homo sapiens, the so-called thinking animal, just think ourselves into this tight little corner that we're trapped in? Somewhere we took a turn all wrong. We turned away from a deep understanding of our wild nature and our wild selves and started to believe in our tamed down versions. We went from being wolves to teacup poodles. We forgot that we are nature. We forgot that we are the human animal. We forgot that the web of life holds us with a fragile thread. We started imposing our will upon the world, thinking that we could control what was happening around us. But the earth, this living planet, she just gives. She gives so generously. She gives us air. She gives us water. She gives us food. And not only do we take this generosity with no gratitude, we take it like it's owed to us, like we're the only species on this planet. We're in the middle of the sixth mass extinction, purely induced by human activity. 1 million species are on the brink of extinction. Biodiversity loss is the greatest danger we're facing right now. Let me explain that. Take our human body. Our gut is our immunity. And we have if we have good immunity, that means we have over 700 to 800 species of bacteria in our gut that's helping break down the food that we eat, that's helping us absorb nutrients and keeping us healthy. Now, if we destroy this body, and what I mean by that is eat all the wrong things, don't exercise, smoke to excess, drink to excess, take antibiotics like candy, we're decimating that bacterial count in our gut. And as that count drops from 700 or 800 down to about 500 or 400, we're decimating our immune system. So that is how the parallel works with the planet. Biodiversity is the immune system of the planet. The more the number of species on the planet, the greater the planet's immunity, the greater the planet's ability to mitigate the effects of what would be a disease for the planet, which is climate change. But here we are decimating that biodiversity. Numbers are crashing. The planet's immunity to be able to cope with everything else that's hitting it is dropping. This is not just the only problem. Climate change is one problem. The other big problem is pathogens and viruses. And the third big problem is the human physical self and our spiritual and mental well-being is connected to the health of the nature around us. So tomorrow we could come up with some great technology that can suck carbon straight out of the atmosphere, bring it back to what we call acceptable levels. But that is still not going to help. We may not have climate-based catastrophes, but what we won't have, if the biodiversity keeps doing a nosedive and if our habitats keep doing a nosedive, is a viable planet to live in. What happens when biodiversity collapses like that, and as I said, if it's the immune system, is that this virus that we're facing today, which is the second problem that we have, virus and pathogens, that's not an alien. It didn't come down from Mars to attack us. It's part of our Earth ecology. It is in living creatures all over the planet. It requires living cells to live in order for it to thrive, because otherwise it's basically a dead organism. So viruses are found in a lot of living creatures. But what biodiversity does is the way it works is it has, if there's one pathogen, there's another pathogen to eat it. Now here we are, we're humans. In our huge population numbers, we're a food market. What do I mean by that? We're like food for predators. Any big animal herds is a target of a predator. A virus is a super predator. Our great numbers attract viruses to us because we're an endless source of food. So when you have biodiversity collapsing, two things start to happen. One is the pathogens that live in living creatures, as stress levels for those living creatures rise when they lose homes and habitat and they start living in areas with other animals they're not used to, their immunity drops, the pathogens come alive. As species between us and them start to shrink because they're collapsing, we come closer to the wild, then we become a viable host for these pathogens. And of course, the dying habitat means, well, it's a problem for all of us. Now, if we increased biodiversity and we regenerated, rewilded, restored habitats, we would be tackling two things. We'd be stopping viruses and pathogens in their tracks. And the second thing we would be doing is we would be actually drawing carbon down from the atmosphere and helping mitigate climate change. And within all this, I've already spoken about how the human numbers also cause a problem. So right now, for example, we have discarded gloves and face masks, which have become our biggest polluters. That's a disgrace. Clearly, we're struggling with the learning curve. Imagine yourselves in your own home. I am sure everyone is house proud. Would you tolerate discarded masks and garbage in your house? You wouldn't. Would you want toxins in your kitchen? No. Would you want nuclear waste in your living room? No. Would you want garbage and masks and all of that thrown about your bedroom? No, you wouldn't, because those would be unhealthy living conditions. So why is it okay for us to do that to our real home, this planet? Throw garbage everywhere, treat it so badly. This living planet, it's our only home. A young girl told us that our house is on fire. We debated about whether she was a media puppet. We debated if she was some liberal agenda stooge or a hoax. We even debated about her mental health instead of stopping for a moment, listening really deeply, looking at her and seeing her as our future, as our daughter, who was asking us to step up and act like the adults we're meant to be. When did we lose the plot? When did we become the species that is willing to thrive on the graves of our children? How is it that we are the so-called educated and civilized that we forgot what our indigenous peoples have known instinctively all along, that we and nature are one combined thing? Recent global surveys show that over 30% of the richest biodiversity, best habitats, rest in places where indigenous people are in charge. This is outside of our protected areas. They have known this truth for a long time, that we and nature are one, no separation, we're one entity. Our mental well-being, our spiritual well-being, our health, everything interconnected. You desecrate what's outside your window, you desecrate this body. Today, doctors are able to, in fact, put nature, being in nature, going out to nature as part of their scripts, as an actual prescription they can give you for improved well-being and health. When the sun sets today, don't look at it as just another sunset and, take it for granted for the hundreds and thousands of sunsets that you've seen. Feel this sunset. Feel that we're on a rock hurtling through space. It is as we rock backwards in our evolution that we feel that the sun is setting. The sun itself is not some static ball in the sky. It too is moving through space. It's dragging our solar system with us as it moves through the galaxy, through the universe. At some point about 4.5 billion years ago, our rock was in the right place at the right time. If it had been a little to the left or the right, or a little too close to the sun or a little further away from the sun, everything would have been absolutely different. In fact, there was such precision, it almost seems like intent. In fact, the conditions were so perfect for life that it feels like such perfect conditions would almost be improbable. In fact, a lot of scientists now believe that perhaps because of this perfection and these perfect conditions, that maybe there is no other life in the universe. The air that we breathe, every breath that we take, is air that has cycled through billions of years of life and is cycling through us every time. The drop of rain that touches our skin, it's the same rain that fell billions of years ago, that fell on great plants and on dinosaurs and is now falling on our skin. It's the same rain that fell to form our lakes and rivers and oceans, which caused then the evaporation, which then forms the rain. The same. We live on this extraordinary home, this earth. We share it with extraordinary creatures. We live at a time when the greatest, biggest giant of an animal bigger than any dinosaur, lives on the planet today. She is the blue whale. We live sharing our planet with a bird that can dive between 270 and 300 kilometers an hour through the air, and that's the falcon. We have a big cat that can go from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, the cheetah, top speed at over 120 kilometers per hour. These are the wonders that we've been gifted. These are the wonders that we live with on this planet. Every breath, every drop, every bit of life a miracle. We are the Goldilocks of the galaxy, just the right size, just the perfect spot, just the perfect home, our only home. This is the 50th year of Earth Day. It is the first year of the decade of hope. It is beyond tragic that we've had to pay this horrible human price to come to this realization. But it would be an even bigger tragedy if we continued on our destructive trajectory, squandering this decade of hope, this decade of realizations that could change the world. It comes down to just one thing: choices that you and I make. There's a poem by the Kenyan poet Warsan Shire. She says, "Late at night, I opened the atlas and I ran my finger across the world. And I asked it, where does it hurt? And it said, everywhere, everywhere, everywhere." Hopefully by the end of this decade, we can do the same. Open an atlas, run our fingers across the world and ask her where she hurts. And perhaps she will say, in some places still, but mostly I'm feeling so much better. Thank you.